In the quiet streets of a sleepy town, a lone police officer discovers two tiny black puppies in desperate need of help. His next move is something no one saw coming. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the small town of Willow Creek, Officer Jake Harlow was wrapping up his usual patrol. The streets were mostly empty, a soft breeze rustling through the leaves of the sprawling oak trees that lined the sidewalks. It was the kind of evening that promised tranquility and peace. However, as Jake's patrol car rounded the corner of Elm Street, his sharp eyes caught a slight movement at the edge of the road. Two tiny black puppies, their coats as dark as the night fast approaching, were huddled together, trembling. They looked up at the officer with wide, fearful eyes, their small bodies shivering uncontrollably. Jake parked his car and approached slowly, his heart tightening at the sight. Despite his years on the force, dealing with everything from high-speed chases to tense negotiations, nothing pulled at his heartstrings quite like the vulnerability of animals. He knelt down, extending a hand gently towards the pups. They flinched at first, but their desperation for help soon overcame their fear. One of the puppies, bolder than the other, took a tentative step forward and sniffed his hand. Encouraged by the lack of threat, it nudged its sibling forward. Within moments, both were snuggling against his palm, their tiny tails wagging cautiously. As Jake scooped them up, wrapping them in the warmth of his jacket, he couldn't help but wonder how two such young creatures ended up alone on a cold street. Were they abandoned? Lost? The thought of anyone leaving such helpless animals to fend for themselves sparked a mix of anger and sadness in him. Jake's decision was instantaneous. He radioed the station, informing them that he'd be taking a detour to the local animal shelter. But as he placed the puppies in the passenger seat and looked into their grateful eyes, a wave of emotion overwhelmed him. Tears, unbidden, began to stream down his face. It wasn't just the puppies' plight that moved him, but a deep personal connection to his past. Years ago, Jake had been that helpless creature in a different sense, lost and alone after a childhood marked by neglect. It was the kindness of a stranger that had given him a second chance, leading him to a career in law enforcement where he vowed to be the protector he had once needed. Now, staring at these tiny beings, Jake realized this was more than just a rescue. It was a reminder of his own journey, a poignant reflection of his life's mission to serve and protect. As the puppies curled up together, safe and warm in his patrol car, Jake knew he had made the right choice, not just for the puppies, but for himself as well. As they drove towards the shelter, the puppies' soft whimpers gradually subsided, replaced by a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. In saving them, Jake felt a piece of himself heal, a reaffirmation of his purpose in this world. As the shelter came into view, the neon sign flickering in the growing darkness, Jake's thoughts drifted back to the station earlier that day. He had been briefed about an increasing number of stray animals in town, a problem exacerbated by the recent closure of a nearby pet shop. Many pets had unfortunately been left behind, with nowhere to go and no one to care for them. This issue had been a growing concern, not just for the community but for Jake personally, as he had always been an advocate for animal rights. Arriving at the shelter, Jake carried the puppies inside, their small bodies still trembling from the ordeal. The shelter staff, led by a kind-hearted woman named Lisa, welcomed them with open arms. Lisa was known in the community for her dedication to animals, running the shelter not just as a haven, but as a home. She took the puppies from Jake, her experienced hands gently checking them over for any injuries. "Looks like they're just scared and a bit underfed, but they'll be okay," Lisa assured Jake, her voice a soothing balm to his worries. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and sadness. "It's been tough with all the recent drop-offs. We're almost at capacity, but we'll always make room for those in need." Jake watched as Lisa and her team set about preparing a small area for the newcomers, laying out soft blankets and filling bowls with food and water. The puppies, now visibly more relaxed, began to explore their temporary home, their tails wagging more confidently with each passing second. As he observed this small victory, Jake's mind wandered to the bigger picture. The town's stray animal problem was not just an isolated issue. It was symptomatic of a larger societal problem that included neglect, abandonment, and the absence of responsible pet ownership education. He felt a renewed sense of duty, a commitment to not only rescue but also to educate. Determined to make a difference, Jake discussed with Lisa the possibility of organizing community outreach programs. These programs would focus on educating pet owners about the responsibilities involved in pet care, the importance of spaying and neutering, and the options available for those unable to care for their pets anymore. Education is just as important as rescue, Jake stated, his voice firm with conviction. We need to address the root of the problem if we're going to make a lasting impact. Lisa nodded in agreement, her expression resolute. Let's do it. Say it's about time we turned the tide on this issue. With your help, I'm sure we can make a significant difference. As they finalized their plans for the outreach program, Jake felt a spark of hope. The task ahead was daunting, but not insurmountable. With the community's involvement and the shelter's resources, they could tackle the problem head-on. Leaving the shelter that evening, Jake felt a mixture of emotions. The weight of the challenge was heavy, but the potential for change was inspiring. As he drove home, the image of the two puppies, now safe and starting a new chapter, reminded him of the impact one person could have. He was ready to fight this battle, not just for the animals but for his community. This was his calling, and he was determined to answer it fully, one small step at a time. The following week saw Jake diving deep into the community outreach initiatives. With Lisa's partnership, they launched a series of workshops and information sessions at local schools, community centers, and even at the town hall. The sessions were designed to be interactive, engaging the community in discussions about animal welfare and the consequences of neglect. Jake found himself in front of varied audiences, from school children to elderly residents, all united by a common love for animals or a curiosity about the responsibilities involved in pet ownership. Each presentation ended with heartfelt stories from the shelter, including the story of the two black puppies he had rescued. These stories, rich with emotional depth, were not just teaching tools. They served as powerful reminders of the vulnerability and resilience of animals. Amidst these efforts, the town's response was overwhelmingly positive. Residents began to show up at the shelter, offering to volunteer or adopt. Local businesses donated supplies, and the community started a fund to support the shelter's expansion plans. This collective action was a testament to the effectiveness of Jake and Lisa's outreach. Moreover, Jake initiated a partnership with the local police department to tackle the issue of illegal pet trading and abandonment. He worked closely with his fellow officers to enforce animal welfare laws more strictly and set up a hotline for reporting cases of animal abuse and neglect. As the project gained momentum, Jake's personal commitment deepened. He often spent his off hours at the shelter, helping with the animals and seeing firsthand the fruits of his labor. The puppies he had rescued were now thriving, their playful antics a regular highlight of his visits. They had become a symbol of hope and recovery, not only for Jake, but for the entire shelter community. One particularly touching moment came during a community fair, where Jake and Lisa set up a booth for the shelter. The fair was bustling with activity, the air filled with the sounds of laughter and music. At their booth, the two puppies, now healthy and full of life, were the stars of the show. People gathered around to pet them, and their story of survival and rescue became a compelling testament to the change the community had embraced. Amid the festivities, a local family approached Jake, expressing their interest in adopting the puppies. They had followed the rescue story and had been touched by the bond they saw between Jake and the animals. After a thorough discussion and a home visit scheduled for the following week, it was clear that the family was a perfect match. As Jake watched the family play with the puppies, a profound sense of accomplishment filled him. It wasn't just about finding a home for two helpless animals. It was about fostering a community that valued and protected its weakest members. This success was a beacon, guiding him towards future endeavors in animal welfare. While Jake's efforts with the community outreach were making significant strides, an unexpected challenge arose. During one of his routine visits to the shelter, Lisa informed him of a new crisis. A local farm had been foreclosed, and several animals were suddenly at risk of being left homeless. This situation required immediate attention, and the shelter was already near capacity. the news hit Jake hard. He knew that the shelter's resources were stretched thin, but the thought of leaving these animals without a place of refuge was unbearable. He decided to take proactive steps to address this new issue without compromising the care of the animals already under the shelter's protection. Jake organized an emergency meeting with the town council to seek additional funding and support. He prepared a compelling presentation that illustrated not only the current crisis, but also highlighted the shelter's recent successes in animal care and community engagement. He proposed a plan for a temporary expansion of the shelter's facilities and outlined a fundraising campaign to support long-term solutions. To his relief and gratitude, the council was moved by his dedication and the clear results of his recent work. They approved an emergency fund and offered their full support for the fundraising initiatives. The local media covered the story, which spurred further community support and donations. It was a crucial win, not just for the shelter, but for the town's commitment to animal welfare. With the funds secured, Jake and Lisa coordinated with other animal rescues and farms across the county to provide temporary housing for the displaced animals. They organized transport, vet checks, and foster care arrangements, ensuring that each animal received the necessary care and attention during this turbulent time. During this period, Jake's leadership and organizational skills were put to the test. He spent countless hours coordinating efforts, managing logistics, and keeping the community informed and engaged. His dedication was a driving force behind the seamless execution of this expansive project. As the crisis stabilized, Jake reflected on the whirlwind of activities and the many small victories along the way. The community's rapid response and the collaborative spirit among various organizations underscored a powerful shift in the town's approach to animal welfare. One afternoon, as Jake walked through the expanded section of the shelter, he stopped to watch some of the newly rescued farm animals settling into their new environment. Among them was a particularly spirited young goat that had quickly become a favorite among the shelter staff for its playful antics and resilience. Watching the goat frolic in the pasture, a smile spread across Jake's face. It was moments like these that reminded him of the impact of his work. Each animal in the shelter had a story, and each story was a testament to the community's capacity for kindness and action in the face of adversity. Amid the ongoing efforts to stabilize the shelter's new residents, a heartwarming development unfolded that reinvigorated the entire community's commitment to animal welfare. One of the local elementary schools, inspired by Jake's sessions and the shelter's efforts, launched an educational program called Pause and Learn. The program aimed to integrate animal welfare education into the school curriculum, fostering early awareness and compassion among children. Jake was invited to speak at the program's kickoff event. As he stood in front of a room filled with eager young faces, he realized the profound impact of his journey. He shared stories of the animals he had helped, emphasizing the importance of kindness and responsibility. The children listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity and empathy. It was a moment of realization for Jake. This was more than just about animal rescue. It was about shaping a more compassionate future. Following the event, the school established a regular visitation schedule with the shelter, allowing students to interact with the animals and participate in care activities. These visits not only helped socialize the animals, making them more adoptable, but also strengthened the children's understanding and empathy towards animals. It became one of the most popular activities among the students, who often returned home with stories of their favorite animals, spreading enthusiasm for the cause within their families. Back at the shelter, Jake and Lisa noticed a significant uptick in volunteer applications and adoption inquiries, many of them from families of the children who participated in the Pause and Learn program. It was clear that the community engagement initiatives were bearing fruit, weaving a fabric of compassion and action that spanned generations. Meanwhile, the shelter's expansion projects were progressing well. New enclosures and improved facilities were being constructed, thanks to the continued support from local businesses and individual contributors. These enhancements allowed for better care of the animals and provided more space for rehabilitation and training programs. One day, as Jake was overseeing the construction of a new kennel area, he received a call from a neighboring town's animal control officer. They had found a litter of puppies in a deserted area, with no mother in sight. Without hesitation, Jake arranged for their transfer to the shelter. When the puppies arrived, they were in poor condition, but with the dedicated care of the shelter staff and volunteers, they gradually began to recover. This new rescue operation served as a stark reminder of the ongoing challenges they faced, but also of the shelter's vital role in the community. Each animal saved was a life transformed, and each adoption was a story of hope renewed. As the day came to an end, Jake walked through the shelter, checking on the newest arrivals and ensuring everything was in place for the night. He paused by the window, looking out at the peaceful evening settling over the town. The challenges were many, but so were the victories. Each day brought new struggles, but also new opportunities to make a difference. As Jake's initiatives continued to flourish, the story of the shelter and its impact began attracting attention beyond the local community. A regional news network decided to feature Jake and the Willow Creek Shelter in a documentary focusing on successful community-led animal welfare programs. This opportunity to showcase their efforts on a larger stage was both exhilarating and daunting. The documentary crew spent several days at the shelter, capturing the day-to-day activities and the special bond between the animals and their caregivers. They filmed the bustling energy of the pause and learn sessions, the quiet moments of care in the medical wing, and the joyful reunions of pets with their new families during adoption days. Jake, though initially hesitant in front of the camera, found his rhythm, sharing his philosophy and the stories that highlighted the shelter's mission. The airing of the documentary was met with an outpouring of support and enthusiasm. Viewers were moved by the stories of rescue and recovery, and donations poured in from all over the region. This influx of resources enabled the shelter to plan for a future project Jake had been dreaming of, a rehabilitation program specifically designed for animals with special needs, like those who were older or had disabilities, ensuring they too had a chance at a better life. Emboldened by this success, Jake organized a community event to celebrate the shelter's achievements and to rally further support for upcoming projects. The event featured guest speakers, live music, and a silent auction with items donated by local businesses. It was a festive affair, attended by hundreds of community members, and successfully raised significant funds for the shelter. Amid the celebrations, Jake introduced the crowd to some of the animals featured in the documentary, including a once paralyzed dog named Max, who had found a new lease on life through the shelter's care. Max's story, like many others, illustrated the profound impact of the community's support and compassion. This event also served as a platform for Jake to announce the establishment of a volunteer-driven outreach team, tasked with visiting other communities to share knowledge and practices in animal welfare. This initiative aimed not only to extend their influence, but also to foster a network of care and support that could respond to animal crises anywhere in the region. As the evening wound down, Jake stood at the back of the gathering, watching the community interact, laugh, and share stories. It was moments like these that reinforced the value of his work, not just in rescues and adoptions, but in weaving a tapestry of community involvement that transformed lives, both human and animal. Reflecting on the journey so far, Jake felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The challenges were ongoing, but the progress made was undeniable. He was no longer just a police officer or a shelter director. He had become a pivotal figure in a movement that championed kindness, care, and hope. In the weeks following the community event, the outreach team led by Jake began to see the fruits of their labor in very tangible ways. Their new program for special needs animals, affectionately called Hearts and Paws, was officially launched. This program provided customized care plans for each animal, integrating medical treatment, physical therapy, and behavioral training with the goal of enhancing their quality of life and increasing their chances of adoption. One of the first participants in the Hearts and Paws program was a senior cat named Whiskers, who had been with the shelter for several months. Whiskers had mobility issues due to arthritis and had been overlooked by potential adopters due to his age and medical needs. The outreach team, utilizing funds raised from the community event, was able to provide Whiskers with specialized veterinary care, including acupuncture and hydrotherapy, which greatly improved his mobility and overall spirits. As the documentary continued to gain traction, more stories like Whiskers began to emerge, drawing attention not only from potential adopters, but also from veterinary professionals and animal welfare educators who were interested in collaborating with the shelter. This network expansion brought new expertise and additional resources, facilitating a series of workshops and seminars held at the shelter. These sessions covered topics such as animal first aid, the importance of mental health in pets, and strategies for integrating special needs animals into homes. Moreover, Jake's vision for a regional network of animal welfare advocates began to take shape. He formed partnerships with other shelters and rescue organizations, creating a coalition that shared resources, information, and support. This coalition worked together on several large-scale rescues and facilitated a multi-shelter adoption event, which successfully placed hundreds of animals in loving homes. Jake also recognized the importance of technology in expanding the shelter's reach and improving its operations. He implemented a new software system that streamlined the adoption process, making it easier for potential adopters to find compatible pets. The system included a feature that allowed people to see the daily lives of the shelter's animals through webcams, increasing transparency and engagement. The impact of these technological improvements was significant. Adoption rates increased, and the shelter's operational efficiency improved, allowing the staff to spend more time on animal care and less on administrative tasks. It also helped them keep better track of the health and progress of animals in their care, particularly those in the Hearts and Paws program. As autumn turned to winter, the shelter prepared for its first holiday season since the documentary's release. Inspired by the community's ongoing support, Jake organized a Home for the Holidays campaign, aimed at finding homes for all the shelter animals by the end of the year. The campaign featured heartwarming stories of the animals, shared across social media platforms and local media outlets, attracting a wave of visitors to the shelter, each eager to provide a forever home. This campaign was not just a success in terms of adoptions, it also brought the community closer together. Local businesses sponsored the campaign, schools organized field trips to the shelter, and families came together to support the cause. It was a festive and joyous time, filled with the spirit of giving and compassion. As the Home for the Holidays campaign drew to a close, the shelter achieved its heartwarming goal. Every animal found a loving home for the holidays. This success was a poignant reminder of the community's capacity for generosity and compassion. The shelter's halls, once filled with the sounds of animals awaiting adoption, now echoed with the joy of families celebrating their new members. However, the new year brought new challenges. With the increasing visibility of the shelter and its programs, Jake noticed a surge in the number of animals being surrendered. Economic difficulties and a rise in pet ownership during the holiday season meant that many people found themselves unable to care for their pets long-term. This situation required a shift in strategy to address the root causes of surrenders. Jake and his team initiated a responsible pet ownership campaign, focusing on educating the public about the long-term commitments involved in caring for pets. The campaign featured workshops, free veterinary checkups, and support services for pet owners facing financial hardships. This proactive approach aimed to reduce the number of animals surrendered by helping pet owners before they reached a crisis point. Simultaneously, Jake expanded the shelter's volunteer program to include a pet support squad. This group of dedicated volunteers provided assistance to pet owners in need, offering everything from pet food donations to temporary foster care. The squad played a crucial role in the community, ensuring that pet owners had the support they needed to keep their animals healthy and happy at home. Amid these initiatives, the shelter's reputation grew, attracting the attention of national animal welfare organizations. These organizations offered grants and funding for innovative projects that could serve as models for other shelters across the country. Jake seized this opportunity to propose a new initiative, a mobile veterinary clinic. This clinic would travel to underserved areas, providing vaccinations, spay, neuter services, and basic veterinary care. The proposal was well received, and soon the mobile clinic became a reality. Outfitted with the necessary medical equipment and staffed by volunteer veterinarians and technicians, the clinic began its rounds. Its impact was immediate and profound, serving hundreds of pets that otherwise would not have had access to veterinary care. As spring approached, the shelter planned its first pet health fair, where the mobile clinic would be showcased. The event promised to be a significant community gathering, offering free health screenings for pets, adoption services, and educational sessions led by experts in pet care and behavior. The fair was not only a celebration of the shelter's successes, but also a platform to continue educating the public about animal welfare. It was an embodiment of Jake's belief that prevention and education were key to improving the lives of animals and the people who care for them. The Pet Health Fair was a resounding success, drawing larger crowds than anticipated and fostering a deeper connection between the shelter and the community. Families attended with their pets, participated in educational workshops, and learned about the importance of regular veterinary care. The event also featured success stories from pet owners who had benefited from the shelter's programs, further reinforcing the positive impact of Jake's initiatives. With the momentum from the fair, Jake focused on another critical area: emergency preparedness for pets. Given the region's susceptibility to natural disasters like floods and wildfires, Jake realized the necessity of integrating pets into the community's disaster response plans. Collaborating with local emergency services, Jake helped develop a series of pet safety workshops that educated pet owners on how to prepare for emergencies, including how to safely evacuate with pets and what supplies to have ready. These workshops were complemented by the introduction of a pet emergency kit available for purchase at the shelter. Each kit included essential items such as pet first aid supplies, portable water bowls, and emergency pet food. The proceeds from the kits helped fund the shelter's ongoing outreach efforts. As summer approached, Jake turned his attention to expanding the shelter's capacity for rehabilitation and rehoming of more challenging cases, including animals with behavioral issues. He implemented a second chance program, which focused on intensive behavioral rehabilitation for animals that had been deemed unadoptable due to their aggressive or fearful behaviors. This program not only improved the animals who received chances of finding homes, but also addressed the higher euthanasia rates for behaviorally challenged pets. The Second Chance program quickly became a core component of the shelter's operations. It utilized advanced training techniques and behavioral modifications provided by specialized trainers. Success stories from this program were highlighted in the shelter's newsletters and on social media, attracting attention from pet behaviorists and animal psychologists who offered their support and expertise. In the midst of these developments, Jake received an invitation to speak at a national conference on animal welfare. His presentation was centered around the innovative programs at the shelter, particularly focusing on the integration of community support, education, and behavioral rehabilitation. His speech underscored the importance of comprehensive community-based approaches to animal welfare and shared best practices that could be adopted by other organizations. The exposure from the conference brought new partnerships and funding opportunities, enabling the shelter to plan further expansions. One significant project was the development of a new facility dedicated entirely to the Second Chance program. This facility would provide a more controlled environment for behavioral training and allow for more individualized care for each animal. Jake's vision for the shelter had evolved significantly from its humble beginnings. It was now not only a refuge for animals in need, but also a center for education, community engagement, and innovation in animal welfare practices. As he reflected on the journey, he was profoundly grateful for the community's unwavering support and the dedicated team that had joined him in this mission. Together, they were setting new standards in the field, creating a model that could inspire change far beyond their own community. Just as Jake and his team began laying the groundwork for the new Second Chance facility, an unexpected and deeply personal challenge emerged, one that tested the very core of Jake's resilience. Late one evening, while finishing paperwork in his small office at the shelter, Jake received a call from the local sheriff's department. A dog matching the description of the two puppies he had rescued months before had been found, abandoned again. Jake's heart sank. That couldn't be right. Both puppies had been adopted by a seemingly loving family, carefully vetted through the shelter's adoption process. He had even followed up personally, visiting their home just weeks after the adoption, finding the dogs healthy, happy, and adored by the children. But the report was clear. One of the two pups, Charlie, had been discovered alone in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. He was scared, dirty and limping from a fresh wound on his hind leg. Jake rushed to the veterinary clinic where the dog had been taken. The moment he stepped into the room, Charlie recognized him. His tail wagged weakly, and he attempted to rise, but pain held him back. Jake dropped to his knees and whispered his name, his voice trembling. The little dog pushed his muzzle into Jake's hands and let out a soft, exhausted whimper. The vet confirmed that Charlie would recover, but the emotional damage might take longer to heal. The betrayal and confusion in his eyes struck Jake like a blow to the chest. How could someone willingly give up such a trusting, gentle soul after everything he had survived? Jake drove home in silence that night, Charlie sleeping in the passenger seat beside him. Anger, sadness, and guilt swirled inside him. Had he failed? Was their system broken? And what about the other pup, Milo? Where was he? Over the next few days, Jake launched an internal investigation into the family who had adopted Charlie and Milo. What he uncovered shocked him. The couple had recently gone through a separation, and in the chaos, the animals were no longer a priority. One had been left behind during the move. The other, Charlie, was simply let out on the street. It was a devastating discovery, and one that shook the entire shelter team to its core. Lisa, usually composed, was in tears when she heard, "We trusted them, Jake," she whispered. "We believed they were the right family." Jake didn't respond at first. He simply stared out the window, his jaw tight. Then, with renewed focus, he turned back toward her. This can't happen again. That night, he gathered the core team for an emergency meeting. They reviewed every step of the adoption process, seeking gaps, overlooked red flags, or anything that could have prevented this. Jake proposed implementing mandatory quarterly follow-ups for all adopted animals, at least during the first year. He also suggested creating a return clause in the adoption contract. If a family faced difficulties, they would be required to return the animal to the shelter rather than releasing them or passing them on. It was a turning point. The shelter, once defined by hopeful rescues and happy endings, was now confronting the darker side of human negligence with new urgency. Yet amidst the heartache, Jake also saw something powerful, a deeper commitment from his team, and a fire in their eyes that said, never again. They would do better for Charlie, for Milo, wherever he was, and for every animal who couldn't speak for themselves. The following days revolved around one mission only, finding Milo. Jake couldn't sleep. Every night he tossed and turned, haunted by the image of Charlie, wounded, betrayed, and the lingering question he couldn't escape. What if Milo is still out there, alone, scared, or worse? He couldn't just sit still. He had to do something. He had to make it right. The next morning, Jake launched an urgent campaign across the shelter's social media platforms, featuring photos of Milo as a puppy and a detailed description. Missing. Maybe frightened but gentle. Microchipped. Please contact Willow Creek Animal Shelter or local authorities if spotted. The post spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times. Local news stations picked up the story. People from all over town began sending in tips and offering to help. Jake quickly organized search parties, dividing the surrounding neighborhoods into zones. Volunteers received printed flyers, maps, and specific instructions on how to approach Milo gently if spotted. Lisa remained at the shelter, coordinating the calls, organizing the information, and acting as the hub of the entire operation. There was a sense of unity in the air, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers walking side by side through fields and alleyways. Everyone remembered the story of the two black puppies rescued by a kind-hearted cop. They had become symbols of hope. Now the town wanted to return that hope, but as days passed without a solid lead, the mood began to shift. Tips slowed, calls quieted. Hope, though not gone, started to flicker. Jake refused to give up. He returned to the industrial area where Charlie had been found, walking the perimeter, calling Milo's name under his breath. He left out food, blankets, and pieces of Charlie's bedding in the hopes the familiar scent might draw him in. And then, 4 days in, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, a call came in. A delivery driver had seen a small black dog darting across a service road on the edge of a wooded area, not far from the old train yard. Jake's heart raced as he grabbed his keys and headed out. Within minutes, he was at the site, flashlight in hand, calling softly. "Milo, it's me, buddy. I'm here, you're safe." A rustle in the brush, then silence. Jake took a cautious step forward. "Come on, little guy. You remember me." Another sound, closer this time. And then, out of the shadows, 2 glowing eyes appeared. Milo stepped forward hesitantly, limping slightly, his fur dirty and matted, but unmistakably him. His tail gave a cautious wag. Jake dropped to his knees. "There you are." His voice cracked as tears filled his eyes. "I'm so sorry I let this happen to you." Milo whimpered and, after a moment's pause, rushed into Jake's arms. In that moment, under the fading light, surrounded by silence and wild grass, Jake made a silent vow. Never again. No matter how much good they were doing, it wasn't enough unless every animal was truly safe, even after adoption. Milo's return sent a wave of emotion through the entire shelter. When Jake walked through the doors carrying the trembling pup in his arms, every staff member and volunteer stopped what they were doing. Lisa gasped and rushed forward, covering her mouth in disbelief. Tears welled up in her eyes as she gently stroked Milo's head. "He's thinner," she whispered, "but he's here. He's safe." They immediately set to work. Milo was examined, cleaned, and treated for a few minor cuts and dehydration. Throughout it all, he never left Jake's side. If Jake stepped away for even a second, Milo whimpered softly, his eyes tracking him until he returned. The bond between them, forged long ago during that cold night on Elm Street, was now stronger than ever. Over the next few days, Milo began to recover. His appetite returned. He wagged his tail more often. He even started to play again, tentatively at first, but with growing confidence. Jake visited him every day, sometimes just sitting beside him in silence, sometimes talking to him about everything they'd been through. But something had shifted in Jake. He could no longer ignore the uncomfortable truth. Even with all the shelter's progress, their adoption process still had blind spots. Loving homes weren't always permanent. Circumstances changed, people changed, and animals who loved unconditionally were often the ones who suffered the most for it. Jake sat down with Lisa and the shelter's leadership team and laid out a plan, not just for Milo, but for the future of every animal that passed through their doors. From now on, all adoptions would come with a lifelong support clause. Quarterly check-ins would become mandatory for at least 2 years. They would offer post-adoption counseling, provide emergency foster care options, and stay in close contact with each family, not to intrude, but to ensure no pet ever slipped through the cracks again. The proposal was bold and logistically complex, but no one argued. Everyone agreed. Milo had shown them what was at stake. And then, Jake did something unexpected. He sat in the play yard. Milo curled beside him and whispered, "You're not going anywhere again." That same evening, he filled out the paperwork and officially adopted Milo himself. No more risks, no more goodbyes. Milo would live out the rest of his life with the person who had first found him and who had never stopped fighting for him. The staff celebrated the adoption with cake and confetti, and the moment was captured in a photograph that later became iconic. Jake kneeling with Milo in his arms, surrounded by his shelter family, all smiling with relief and joy. That image would later hang in the shelter's lobby beneath a plaque that read, "No one left behind, ever." But for Jake, the work wasn't over. He knew that for every Milo, there were dozens more animals in need. His mission hadn't ended, it had evolved. And with renewed purpose, he began preparing for what would be the most ambitious chapter yet in his life's work. Months passed, and the shelter blossomed into something far greater than Jake had ever imagined. What had started as a place of rescue had transformed into a sanctuary of hope, innovation, and education. The Second Chance facility was now operational. The mobile clinic was serving rural communities weekly, and their post-adoption support program, dubbed Forever Families, had already prevented a dozen potential returns. But Jake wasn't satisfied with just local change. He had begun corresponding with shelters across the country, sharing protocols, offering digital toolkits, and hosting virtual seminars on sustainable animal welfare practices. His inbox was flooded daily. Messages from small towns, large cities, even international organizations wanting to replicate what Willow Creek had built. Then came the invitation that changed everything. A major national foundation that funded groundbreaking community initiatives had selected Jake and his team as finalists for a $1 million grant. The award would fund the creation of a regional training center, an institute dedicated to teaching other shelters how to integrate community outreach, long-term pet care planning, and compassionate rehabilitation. Jake stood before the selection committee weeks later, presenting with quiet passion. He didn't use flashy words or statistics. Instead, he told stories about Charlie, about Milo, about the kids in the Pause and Learn program, and about the exhausted farmer who cried when the mobile clinic saved his aging shepherd from a painful condition he hadn't been able to afford to treat. He ended his speech simply, "We don't just rescue animals, we rescue the parts of ourselves we forgot: empathy, trust, connection. And when we protect the voiceless, we remind our communities what it means to care without condition." The room was silent. Then applause. 3 weeks later, Jake received the call. They had won. The Willow Creek Animal Shelter would become the first community-based training institute for integrated animal welfare on the West Coast. Construction would begin in the fall, and applications from shelters across the country were already coming in. When Jake shared the news with Lisa and the team, the room erupted in cheers. But as the noise died down, Jake looked over at Milo, now stronger, tail wagging peacefully by his feet, and felt something deeper than pride. He felt peace, not because the work was over, but because it was no longer his alone. He had built a movement, one that would outlast him, one where every rescue mattered, where every pet had a future, and where every tear shed for a lost animal could become the spark for something extraordinary. On a quiet spring morning, the first beams of sunlight filtered through the large windows of the newly inaugurated Willow Creek Center for Humane Outreach and Rehabilitation. The building stood proudly on a hill just beyond the town's edge, surrounded by meadows and tall trees, symbolic, peaceful, and full of promise. Inside, the halls buzzed gently with life. Trainees from shelters across the country moved through classrooms and kennels, taking notes, watching demonstrations, asking questions. They studied real cases, learned trauma-informed care techniques, observed adoption counseling sessions, and sat in workshops led by professionals and volunteers who had lived the lessons they taught. Jake walked those halls slowly, absorbing every detail. Each corner of the facility had a story etched into it. A photo of Charlie and Milo hung near the entrance, alongside a plaque that read, "Because every life deserves a second chance." As Jake entered one of the training rooms, a young woman paused her presentation and smiled. "We were just sharing case studies from our shelters," she said. "Want to add one of yours?" Jake chuckled. "Only if you've got a full hour." The room laughed, but then he paused, gaze softening. "There was a time," he began, "when I thought rescuing animals was about just getting them off the streets. But it's not. It's about listening to what they teach us, about love, loyalty, forgiveness, and how even the smallest, quietest beings can lead us to our greatest purpose." He left the room to a standing ovation. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the facility's lights turned golden in the dusk, Jake sat on a bench outside with Milo curled beside him. The grass swayed gently in the breeze, and distant laughter echoed from the campus below. Jake looked down at the aging dog, gently scratched behind his ear, and smiled. "You did good, little guy," he whispered. "You helped change everything." For the first time in a long while, Jake didn't feel like he was chasing something. He didn't feel the weight of what still needed to be done. Instead, he felt rooted, in a purpose fulfilled, in a legacy built, in a life that had come full circle. And as the stars began to pepper the night sky, a soft peace settled over Willow Creek. A peace earned not by perfection, but by compassion, persistence, and the unshakable belief that every soul matters. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. There are thousands of animals like Charlie and Milo waiting for someone to notice them, to fight for them, to love them. So share this story. Adopt if you can. Volunteer if you're able, because sometimes saving a life saves yours too. And if you're new here, welcome to a place where every life has a chance. Subscribe for more true stories that will break you, heal you, and stay with you forever. We'll see you in the next one.